This is Defenders TV Podcast, episode 158, where we're talking about Luke Cage Season 2, and we're on the first episode, episode 1, Soul Brother number 1.
You think I'm holding back? Wow! You think I'm holding back? I'm out to save you.
Welcome back, fellow Defenders. We're back with another Netflix series, a brand new one this time. We're starting off our coverage for Luke Cage Season 2 with Soul Brother number 1, the first episode of the series. I'm one of your hosts, Derek.
Hello, I am one of your other hosts, John.
And rounding out this trio, I am Chris.
Welcome back to Luke Cage. You guys looking forward to talking about this one?
This one's going to be good. There's a lot of funky soul in the air. And I'm enjoying what I've seen so far and can't wait to discuss.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, really looking forward to this one. Loved this vibe.
Yeah, it's definitely about the vibe in this show. We talked about all of our thoughts on all of season 1 and Luke Cage's appearances on the Defenders if you haven't heard that episode. Or if you're joining us for the first time, you can find that over on defenderstvpodcast.com and subscribe to the podcast, which will give you access to all of the episodes of our Luke Cage season 1 coverage, our Defenders coverage, and our little recap of everything that's happened so far and everything you need to know to prepare you for Luke Cage season 2. This is being released on the 22nd of June. So just as you're hearing this episode, or this episode's being released, you should be watching episode 1 of Luke Cage.
And it's great to hear that our podcast is a she. Yes.
It is. Of course it is, John.
She will grant you access to all our episodes of season 1 of Luke Cage.
Well, let's get right into our coverage of Luke Cage if you guys are ready to go.
Oh, absolutely. Derek, fire away. What are some of the episode details for this episode?
Well, as usual with the Netflix series, this episode was written by the showrunner Cheo Hodari, who gave us season 1 of Luke Cage, and his imprint is all over this episode. Really has his stamp, and his way of running the show is different from any of the other Netflix shows. It was directed by Lucy Liu. Woo! Who has so many great credits, from her work back in the day on Ally McBeal to Kill Bill Volume 1, which she references in this episode. There's a little reference to Kill Bill within this episode, which I'm sure we'll call out as we go through it. But yeah, really interesting to see her in the director's chair.
Yes. And of course, she starred in one of my absolute favourite episodes of Futurama. Philip J. Fry.
Yes, she played a robot in that episode, didn't she?
Did. It's Robot Lucy Liu.
Yes, that's very cool.
But you cannot beat her in her titular work, which is, of course, Elementary. Some of the best work she's ever done.
I have never watched an episode of Elementary, actually.
No, I haven't either, and I still prefer the fact that her stomach became a popcorn maker in Futurama.
I was wondering what show that was in. Was it in Elementary? Because that would have been very, very
That
strange.
would have been hilarious.
Anyway, all episodes of the show, just to mention it, all episodes of the show are taken from songs from Pete Rock and CL Smooth, just like the first season of Luke Cage season 1, where all of the episodes are taken from songs by Gangstar. Every single episode is named after songs by Pete Rock and CL Smooth. I've got a playlist over on Spotify if you want to hear what the actual song sounded like, but this is Soul Brother number 1, and they even worked into the episode, something they didn't do last season. They worked in Soul Brother number 1 into this episode. But John, do you want to tell us what they gave us with your synopsis for Soul Brother number 1?
Sure. Luke Cage is back in Harlem defending the streets from crime, but he's angry and frustrated. Not only are the drug pushers using his name to sell their gear, but every time he shuts down a corner, another pops up to take its place. Away from the street, Luke settles back in with Claire Temple, but Luke is resistant to her involvement in his investigations and the idea that he could earn a living from his crime fighting. Meanwhile, at Harlem's Paradise, the crime families of Harlem come together at the invitation of Mariah Dillard, as she and her new beau Shades attempt to convince them to invest in a venture that will clean her money and get her out of crime for good. However, as they make their plans, so too does a new arrival in Harlem, as Bushmaster comes to sweep away the old guard, and he has his sights set on Brooklyn, then Harlem, and the new head of the Stokes family, Mariah Dillard.
If you haven't joined us before, the way we cover our podcast is that we discuss our top 5 points. And since this is Luke Cage, it'll be our top 5 bullet points for the series. all the things that stood out to us about the episode. Usually that means that we talk about every single thing that happened and just slot them into 5 points. So to kick us off, our bullet point number 1. What's my name? We are reintroduced to Luke Cage, obviously. He is the main character of the show, and we get a great reintroduction to him. What a great way to start it off. They don't even have the opening titles, but his name is stamped all over everything in that first scene as the new drug on the streets of Harlem is named Luke Cage. It'll make you bulletproof, man.
That actually I really, really loved. Just after the big fight where, effectively he's like, he knows he's gonna beat their asses. And of course, they're all kind of resigned to it. And like, even one of them goes, look, I've got to try. Uh-huh. But as they're all running out of the warehouse where all the drugs have been packed up, he runs past one of the kids on the corner trying to sell it. Mm-hmm. I just thought that was so good. Get your Luke Cage here. It's bulletproof, really, really good. Just that vibe of having, his name on the drugs that he's trying to stamp out in the neighborhood and in Harlem. It's a nice little moment, and certainly as it develops, just how, again, in a Hydra type way, every time he gets rid of one corner, another pops up to take its place, or maybe 2, possibly. I really, really like that kind of analogy of like hitting water.
Yes.
Really good.
Yeah.
I thought it was an interesting take in that they're saying that since the end of Defenders, in a small amount of time now that has kind of transpired, Luke Cage has become so synonymous with Harlem. Mm-hmm. And having his father there kind of giving that speech around why Luke Cage is wrong for Harlem in his view. Mm. It's a very sanctimonious, dripping with venom and ire, and kind of, in a fake news world, it is fake news.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
It's twisting the facts. But as I said, I found most interesting is that it's pointing out that he's become so much of a brand.
Yeah.
The bulletproof
absolutely.
Black man of Harlem is now so much of a thing that it is becoming a brand name for drugs.
Yeah.
And it's forcing then Luke to do this, and we see the map behind him with multiple X's on it. Mm-hmm. And he, as John said, like every time he shuts down one, another's popping up. It's a nice way to say that he's been continuously working since kind of he's come home, since he's been the free man. Carl Lucas is no more.
Yes.
Luke Cage is the power man of Harlem.
Yeah, there's loads of touches in here about the fact that he is now the famous man of Harlem. We saw a little bit of that in his first episode in Defenders. We see him coming back to the town. Everybody knows him in Harlem because of what he's done in season 1 and becoming a free man now. He's completely free to do what he wants to do and to save the people of Harlem. We see little touches in there, like they've created the Hero of Harlem app where anybody can follow his movements, tag him in photographs, tag his location. So you see the kind of downside of fame or downside of the brand that is Luke Cage. This also speaks a little bit to having to control your brand. You see that with a lot of big companies trying to control how people perceive their brand, which is what Luke's trying to do at the opening of the episode. Someone has taken his name and put it on drugs, the one thing he's trying to stop in the city. And he can't really do anything about it because, as you say, John, he's punching water. He's punching all the time these people, but it's not shutting down any of the big people that have made this decision to take his brand and put it on something and sell it to the kids of Harlem.
It's really interesting you say brand, because I had that to mind as well. This idea that, he has become a brand of Harlem that represents Harlem, but also, like with any brand, as you say, you've got the detractors, which is in this case his dad. You've got the infringers who are trying to use that brand for something that he certainly doesn't want them to. And it also plays into that, personality where, people become the brand, whether it's from, pop music or music in general, the one-namers, Prince, Madonna, that iconic name becoming the brand to sell their music, or even just with like Dr. Dre and so on.
Yeah.
Really, it really feeds into that, especially when music is such a central part of the showrunners infusing of the culture and of just the vibe and the essence of this show. It's a really interesting take.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about some of the other good sides, I suppose, of the fame that's coming along here. Huge references in here, I think, to Hero for Hire, to him moving towards Heroes for Hire. We have Claire Temple pushing him to Why Don't You Sell It? We have the kid who's been following him around with a camera since season 1, DW, who keeps saying to him, bulletproof, gotta get you paid, right? We have Bobby in Pop's barbershop saying to him, what about talking to sponsors? We have that really funny moment when he comes back after being shot in the new sweatshirt that he's wearing to promote African Americans going to college, going, that sponsorship of college didn't seem to work out. The logo's a bit too big. It seems to be a target, and that's where all the bullets went into the top. Nice little touches in here about the other side of fame. He is famous. He's not cashing in on it yet, and it does seem like everybody's pushing him towards the idea of Heroes for Hire. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting that Luke seems to really want Misty again as a partner here. But then the difference with his approach to, say, Claire, who he's living with, and where, she wants to be his backup, not just his girl. That's what she says.
Yeah.
And yet he's totally resistant to this. And he's not with Misty. He sees Misty as being a cop. And he's this vigilante crime stopper, investigator that should expect bullets to fly their way. He doesn't want that for Claire, yet she wants to be as much a part of, his world and what he does. And again, she is another one saying, you should earn money from this. Cops do, firefighters do, ambulance drivers. And with vigilantes, well, what's the difference? That blurring. We asked so many times on the podcast, what about the police? Some of the shows have really had the police department, the detective central, and you see the characters playing off that. And then there's also this idea of, we may ask, well, where are the police? Why aren't you just getting the police? And here it's kind of saying those lines are blurred. I think that's a really nice way of, sort of bridging that view of, where is the police when it's just this one man going after, these criminals on the streets.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm going to make one prediction now. I know it's only episode 1 and it's like, hey, we're just into it. But
is this an obvious one?
Well, it's Pops's barbershop being kind of, they're not being able to pay the rent, etc., etc. They do know a billionaire. I'm just saying, he bought a dojo to help with the rent.
He bought a restaurant in Defenders just so they could have dinner and a place to hide out, yeah.
Exactly. So I'm kind of thinking there may be someone purchasing the building, helping out in the future. Mm-hmm. For those of you who didn't watch Defenders or haven't watched Iron Fist, we're of course talking about Danny Rand, the immortal Iron Fist, who through the comics and in the Defenders is now becoming quite chummy. In the comics, he is best friends with Luke Cage.
Yeah, and they were definitely setting that back up in Defenders. They definitely got to a great place by the end of the show where you could see them calling on each other.
Yes, so I do see that is potentially something that may come in the future. Kind of like Bruce Wayne just buying a hotel to play in the Fountain.
Absolutely. And you see, when we got Pop's barbershop back, we did also have the swear jar present. You see Luke Cage coming in, putting in a dollar bill or a couple of dollars to pay.
It was a heavy night. It must have been at least 50.
Yeah, to pay for a heavy night of swearing. So the swear jar will be in effect for this episode, fellow Defenders. So if you do swear, I will have to cover it up with our swear jar again. Please don't swear, but if you do, I will be covering it up.
Oh,
that is fantastic.
But great to see it back.
Producer.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm definitely up for a Heroes for Hire moment, even if they don't call Danny and Luke getting together Heroes for Hire. I really just think it would be fantastic. So yeah, I'm totally with you on that prediction, Chris. Absolutely.
So, just so we don't make our big mistake that we made during Jessica Jones season 2, where we saw the first episode and said that character's going to become Hellcat, let's not do that for this season. It will happen when it happens. This season's not going to be about Heroes for Hire. This season's going to be about Luke Cage living in the city of Harlem and how fame is affecting him. So if we see Heroes for Hire, I think it's going to be in the Heroes for Hire season coming in the future. I don't think we're going to see it in this show. So let's not get our hopes too high.
You're no fun.
I am keeping my hopes really high. I don't think it detracts from Luke Cage at all. And of course, we do get reference to him as Power Man from Claire Temple as well. As he goes off to cover a lead, which is actually a double cross from his sort of man on the ground.
Sugar. Yes, Sugar's back from season 1. And they have just that great moment where they meet up, and Luke finds out that he's driving for, one of the other gangs. Sugar turns around to him and says, I'll give you the information. And then Luke keys his car. And Sugar goes, there's something wrong with you, man. There's something wrong with you. You're wrong in the head. It was hilarious.
He doesn't even key his car. He nails his car.
There you go.
Literally with his fingernail. I was like, dude, that's a nice Jeep.
Really hot.
Speaking of his superpowers, I just want to bring one point. I know we're jumping straight to the end of the episode.
Yeah.
But Luke's got powers now. Luke's been empowered upon his powers. And the Judas bullets are no longer working. They're no longer a threat.
What a great moment. Like, we've talked about this before when we were doing our wrap up, that Chris hasn't been watching the trailers. And there was one moment from the trailer that was really worrying me, which was a big explosion in a truck that Luke walks away from. I was thinking, this is the one that Chris wants to avoid, because that's something that's happening in episode 10. It happens in episode 1. He steps inside of a truck investigating what's going on, and then gets blown up, walks out from the truck, makes that amazing speech to camera, just after getting shot by a Judas bullet, the thing that was supposed to kill him in season 1. And now he's impenetrable to it. It just looks like it does hurt him, but it doesn't explode inside him like it did in season 1, or take him down or take him out like it did in season 1. That's cool.
Yeah, it didn't even go through.
Yeah.
So it basically burrowed unsuccessfully into his skin and then blew up on his skin. So okay, 2 parts to this. 1, the trailers. That scene was fantastic. The explosion, which I now guess is basically in the trailer. I was like, oh my god, that's amazing looking. So I'm very happy I've stayed trailer free.
There you go.
What I probably will do is in our final episode review, post watching the final episode, I will then watch all the trailers.
Right.
And then I'm going to talk to you guys as a separate point, just to go, am I glad I stayed trailer free? What did I think anything? Because you guys have watched them, so let's have a comparison.
We almost recorded a podcast about them.
Yeah, and of course, Chris, you almost didn't join us for this episode because you didn't want to spoil yourself.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't want to spoil myself at all. I just didn't want to watch it. No, I lied.
Speaking of other points, anything else on Luke Cage before we move on to case note 2?
Yes. So very quickly, just on the Judas bullet. So in season 1, in case any of our listeners have decided to jump in at season 2, I would go back and listen to our coverage of season 1 and watch season 1. But anyway, so he goes through the process that turned him into Luke Cage a second time during season 1. So the question I now have is, where, now that he knows he's impenetrable, immune to the Judas bullets, what else has happened?
Right.
So is he twice as strong and he just hasn't noticed? Will we get a very much Spider-Man training montage where we see Luke Cage trying to lift like different trucks and things, as now go, oh my god, I'm actually stronger, I'm more impenetrable, I am the unbreakable skin? Will we get another axle grinder to the abs?
That would be hilarious. Well, of course, we didn't get Marvel abs in this, but we got our first ever Marvel bubble butt showing in Luke Cage episode 1. Yeah. As Mariah Dillard would say, prison did your body good. Luke Cage.
Love it.
Yes. Speaking of Mariah, gentlemen, I think we should move to our case note number 2.
Absolutely. Bullet point number 2, the King and Queen of Harlem. We have Shades and Mariah just in absolute love together. Mariah was my absolute favourite character of season 1. I think we all spoke about that and said that pretty much her character may have been in the background for some episodes, but was definitely the central villain. She's got it going on in season 2.
She is certainly loving it up. I must say, I do like this idea of Shades and Mariah Dillard together. I certainly wouldn't call her his auntie
Ooh,
ever. Given what happens to the waiter in the bar, he gets the crap kicked out of him.
I think he even calls for him to be killed for just that slight.
Yeah,
as well.
But I'm fascinated by Mariah. I absolutely love her. I just love how she moves, how she conducts herself, holds herself. I just think she is so cool. And I think with Shades, it's like, Shades is a difficult character, I think, to kind of really invest in or get to know, because in a sense, that is his character, is that he's totally introspective. Mm-hmm. He has the shades on that means you can't look into his eyes. And like, he's a difficult read, basically. Mm-hmm. And you're kind of just there going, who is playing who potentially here in this power couple? Is Shades playing Mariah because, it's got him to the top of the pile in Harlem, as Cockroach says? Or is Mariah thinking that, this guy brings in the muscle, the protection that she has now lost, obviously with Cottonmouth having been killed in season 1, her brother?
I think this is absolute love. I really do. I can see that they're both seeing each other as this only makes us stronger, the two of us together. And I think Shades is going a little bit crazy in love, to quote Beyonce. I think he's kind of losing it a little bit, where if anybody criticizes her, we see it twice in this episode, if anybody criticizes her, he just goes off on one. You say about him wearing the shades to block it so nobody can see what he really thinks. He takes the glasses off pretty quickly when anybody throws any shade at Mariah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm not saying that he is not protecting her or anything like that, but it's just one of those things. Is it a couple of convenience, so to speak, or is there something really developed much deeper from season 1? Mm-hmm. And I think it's more on Shade's side at the moment, in that you just can't read him. You see him with Comanche, his kind of right hand man, mm-hmm. and you're just kind of going, is he trying to build up his own power base here, that he sees this, almost as a Game of Thrones king and queens, as we've said in this point, that he will supplant her at some point. He knows now she wants to get out, from this dirty money. She wants to kind of put the Stokes name behind her. She really wants us to, break free of this life that, she says has, kept her family down, to clean her family name and to clean the money that she will use to spend the rest of her life out of this whole crime syndicate.
Interesting, isn't it?
So, we both and all agreed Mariah character, Shade's character were fantastic in season 1. Mm-hmm. They came on a bit heavy in this episode because you're assuming, or maybe there's an assumption that some people are getting in after season 2, so they need to lay down the foundations. They need to set everything up very quickly. So my kind of, from what I remember of the characters, and it could be memory kind of doing, they kind of laid it on quite thick with Mariah and Shades and that relationship. Now, I'm not saying it was terrible. I'm not saying it was bad, but taking, for example, the scene in the restaurant where the waiter asked that question and she starts sucking Shades' thumb.
Yeah.
Kind of then starts fondling him and arousing him under the table while people are there in front of them.
Yeah.
They really kind of laid it on thick.
See, I think that was almost Mariah's version of what Shades did. It was like, I don't give a damn what this waiter thinks. Even if he does think I'm his aunt and he's my nephew, I'm going to go right for it. I think it was all for a nice knife in the back of the waiter before he got the hell beaten out of him by Shades. I think that's what the scene was. I don't think it was really just there to tell the audience they were together. I think that was dropped well before that in the conversations. Mariah's talking to Shades about changing his name from Shades to his real name, about standing up and becoming a real man. You got to also remember while there hasn't been a huge amount of time passed from the Defenders, there's been a huge amount of time passed for Mariah and Shades, because the last time we saw them was the end of season 1, where Luke Cage went off to prison. He stayed his time in prison and had his time with the Defenders, which I think was only about 4 or 5 days, but that's at least 6 to 8 months of these two being in each other's pocket, controlling Harlem, and being far enough away from everybody below them, all their underlings. There's a constant gag throughout this episode where Mariah doesn't remember the name of Shades' right-hand man. She keeps looking at him going, who are you? Keeps telling him to get out of the room, you know. It's a nice gag just to say how divorced she is from the people around her now, because herself and Shades have formed this bond between them where they're now running the city and keeping everybody away, because what happens when you let somebody close that you don't trust? Well, Cottonmouth found out the wrong way.
True. I'll agree with 99% of that.
Uh-huh.
It just feels a bit thick to me. Like, laid on thick. And nothing wrong. Because, again, there was only a certain point in this episode I was like, okay, I get it. Everything else with these two characters, I'm still loving. Mm-hmm. The relationship, the back and forth. Like, for example, that scene where they're in the office and she straddles them, they're talking about the next steps, what they're going to do and how they're going to decide about
the big deal.
The big deal.
Mm-hmm.
That was done well,
mm-hmm.
because even though she does straddle him and unzips things and starts grinding, and it was done tastefully because it wasn't as in your face as hand down the pants and sucking a thumb and just laying it on. Like, I don't know. It just felt somewhat, hey audience, in case you didn't know, these two are together, and now we're done. Now we can get on with the story.
Isn't it great?
I mean, I think it was supposed to be laid on thick for that scene, because I think it is about her just sending that message going, I don't care what you think about the age difference, or whether you're going to mistake me for his auntie, his grandmother, his great-grandmother, or whatever, or mother, with this guy. And I think, the fact that then he does get the beaten out of him, really does mean then that that's the two different approaches that these two people do. And like, I thought that was kind of interesting, because even that you have the guy giving him the inside information, rolling his eyes at this kind of play being enacted in front of the waiter after he's done it. It's kind of like he's there rolling his eyes, getting back to his cocktail that he's had. Yeah. So I know what you mean. It is very thickly laid on, but I think it's part of that scene just to make that point, because then I think the rest of their relationship, she asks him, give me the briefing, leave nothing out. As you say, he's there with her as then she's brought in all these different crime families, for this deal where she wants to get their money to invest in order to get out. So after that, I think it's all kind of it's that really close relationship that they have, both now personally, but also, within the business of crime that they do.
Yeah. And also there to show how unhinged Shades becomes when Mariah's talked about. I think that's one of the elements that's in there. Yeah, but as you say, let's talk about the actual storyline that's in here for these characters. We've got, this idea of a deal where she could invest 20 million, clean her money, clean her name, earn billions back on some supposed possible future tech that this guy happens to know all about, but nobody else knows. A little bit of insider trading there to get her clean and clear of Harlem. Something strikes me about that as being quite shady. I'm not sure if that deal is on the level or whether he's just going to take his 20 million and go run. I think there's a little drop line from him where he says, I've already got the offshore companies set up in my name, and I've got power of attorney as well. So you're completely clear of this. No problem at all. You just hand me over that $20 million check and you'll be safe as houses. Not expecting that's going to go down too well, or go down too well for the two of them anyway. But she calls in the other heads of the crime families to Harlem's Paradise, of course, the other central location for the show. I love this scene with the other heads of the families. Chris, what do you think of the other heads of the Harlem gangs?
I really enjoyed it. I do like both of their approaches, and then Shades. Well, first of all, with Shades' rundown on who they are, what they control, etc. And then what we do is get to meet the Cuban kind of side of the family who are into all the drugs and the thing. And then we see the Jamaican kind of crime family, and they're all into the weapons and the weapon running, gun running, etc. And then we see this new upstart, who, if you want to call it that, the aspiring mob boss Cockroach, pretty much an Ivy League boy who now has all the NBA players and illegal poker dens, kind of casinos and things like that. I found I'm really enjoying it. This is a thread that straight away has piqued my interest. I'm interested to see, is Cockroach going to try and squirm his way in there with Mariah over Shades? Is Shade going to lose his shit and go after Cockroach? I know I said I didn't enjoy straight away the beginning of Mariah and Shades. These characters and their storyline to me is really interesting, because we see Mariah trying to kind of get her informational web like her mama, kind of all those kind of pieces. So she's still running Harlem's Paradise and she's using it to gain what she needs. She wants to get out. Are they going to get out? I don't think so.
Yeah.
I think it's going to end up being something very it's going to be a thread that goes on where Black Mariah, as she's known in the comic books, and her pseudonym, and as she calls herself in the end of the season 1, I think this is gonna be, no, I am a crime family. I am the crime family of Harlem and Manhattan and etc.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something that always comes back to kind of mob movies. Things like Godfather have done it really well, where you have families, actual families set up to control areas of a city, and then suddenly they start to step on each other's toes a bit, and then they start having to either work together or kill each other. That's kind of the only choice you have here. Either you let them control different areas of the city, around Harlem, around Brooklyn, or you kill them and then take over their territory. And that's where the kind of battles and stuff starts to come out. So starting off episode 1 of season 2 with 4 different crime families. And I love how Cockroach describes each of them. I love, you're not going to give it over to the cigar blacks, which is the Cubans. You're not going to give it up to the ganja blacks, which is the Jamaicans. You're going to keep it for the real blacks of New York, the Southern blacks, which I love. I just love that he's also effectively an interloper in New York. He's not born and bred there. He's saying, we came from the South. We're the ones that are taking New York back, and we can work together. Leave it out for these international people coming into our town and taking it over. I think that's a lovely play there, because you've already got everybody on edge with each other.
Big time.
I really liked how Cockroach is the 21st century gangster. He's like, I don't want to buy you out. I want controlling interest. I want to buy in. I want to fund. And you're like, oh, this is gonna get interesting. Yeah. Because he's the Wall Street gangster. Yeah. He's like, I've got the money. I want some of the power. I'm gonna buy in, and we do this as a business.
Yeah. And why doesn't Mariah take that? It is because of the line that he says, I want controlling interest, isn't it? It's because he's basically saying, of course I'll go into business with you, but I'll be the one in control of it. So she, again, is having somebody try to undercut her. So Mariah's immediately standoffish with that plan.
Yeah, and she's a bit wary of him, because she sees him down by the bar with Comanche, and it's kind of like she just sees them as, fresh out of jail. That they were effectively stupid enough to get themselves in jail as well, probably. This scene really was fantastic. And I'm kind of there going, is the guy with the plastics venture to try and convert 20 million to $1 billion? Is this a plant from someone who will be talking later in terms of Bushmaster?
Maybe.
In terms of to get these, crime families together, because you do get that flashback then with the headshot to one of the Jamaican, members of the gang, from season 1, from Diamondback. And you see the blood spray on the wall past Mariah's face. I thought that was a really interesting note to take from that scene, to flash back to season 1, showing the murder by Diamondback of one of the Yardies, which is the Jamaican gang. And certainly given that Bushmaster is Jamaican as well. And I have to say, despite the name Nigel, I really liked, I loved the accent. I absolutely loved that vibe, coming from the Jamaicans in this first episode. I just thought it was really, really cool. I loved the intonation. I loved the accent, the different bits of dialect, as Nigel was speaking, God rest his soul. And, of course, as, that whole scene then in Mariah's office, just how she's weighing them up. You know, she's had her intel from Shades. You know, I just think it is really interesting. And we find out that the, sort of the Cuban guy, is it Atora? I think it is.
Yes,
because I was wondering, is it El Terra or El Rey was the other one, but it's Atora the third. He is the Sofa King, is he?
He is.
Of Harlem.
Yeah.
That he is in his past as well connected with Shades.
Yeah. It's really interesting, isn't it? And they do call out that he has many different names. There is that moment when Luke Cage finds him, brings him into Misty, and goes, El Rey my ass, basically, as if he can't even stand up against the old people that used to run that business, which is very cool. Not to spoil anything at all. This is not a spoiler at all for the rest of the season, but I have to say, I loved the two Jamaican guys in this episode. Absolutely loved those two characters. They're brilliant. One character does mention later on in the series that you can't understand every fourth word these guys say. And I am so happy that Netflix, these preview copies of the Netflix shows that came to us for our reviews of Luke Cage came with the subtitles turned on, because I wouldn't have understood half of what these characters say throughout here. I don't get the dialect, but I love it. I love the flow of it. I love when two of the characters are speaking to each other, because they get the flow and it fires off each other like poetry. It's really, really cool. But I wouldn't have understood it because I just don't come from that background of having that Jamaican dialect around me all the time.
So I did have a question, and hopefully one of our fellow defenders might be able to answer this. As you said, I'm the same. I'm not used to the dialect. I'm not used to the accent. Mm-hmm. Typically when the Irish are portrayed on American TV, we could say there's a slightly stereotypical, sure to be sure, you know, the laddie, the diddly-eye is thrown on in some of the accents. Mm-hmm. So I'd be very interested to know, is the accent authentic?
I would say so.
Is it overproduced? Is it overinflected? Or is this actually, for potentially some of the people in Harlem, is this very kind of authentic? So I'd love to know if any of our fellow defenders listen to this and go, actually, I know my best mate's Jamaican, or I know Jamaican, they sound as musically as they do, etc. And it's laid on a bit thick, but it's actually close, or oh my god, that's like Chris singing The Fields of Athenry and Diddly Eye on the next episode.
Well, let's put it this way. I would say this is closer to Brad Pitt's Snatch Irish accent than Tom Cruise's Far and Away Irish accent.
Okay.
Yeah?
That's still not great, but I get what you're meaning.
Oh, Brad Pitt's Snatch Irish accent was one of those accents that you only properly hear in Ireland, and was subtitled exactly as such, because most of the words he said wouldn't make sense unless you actually translated them into English. So that's what I mean. It's better than his Devil's Own accent. How about that?
True, but also that dialect that he is doing is a very small subsection and not Irish.
Oh, absolutely, but there's a new accent every street in Ireland, so you'd never be able to capture it.
That is true. Anyway, it was an interesting thought that kind of like, oh, actually, is that on point? Is that... Anyway, let's take it on from there.
Absolutely. Let's get on to bullet point number 3. Because you mentioned some people coming out of prison, Misty Knight's storyline coming into season 2 is very dependent on what's happened in season 1 with her ex-partner Scarf getting arrested. We see the impact of what's happened to other characters in the city. We see Misty's come back from her fight in the Defenders, a huge tie into the Defenders. You couldn't not notice that something had happened to her between season 1 and season 2. Misty's lost her arm in that battle at the end, protecting Claire Temple with Colleen Wing. She lost her arm in that battle, and now we see the impact of that coming into play. But as I mentioned, the big impact is that a lot of the people that she put away with her previous partner are back on the street because Scarf either knowingly or unknowingly messed up their investigation. So they were all just revolving door like Arkham Asylum.
Yeah, and Dontrell Cockroach Hamilton is one of these guys, and again, I think, it's really good to see Misty, back out. I love seeing Claire working with her, the whole night nurse aspect that she would be helping her, rehabilitate in this way. And I think not only is it pretty tight to the defenders, obviously with Misty having, lost her arm, but even with Claire Temple during the rehabilitation, she's referring to the defenders and particularly like to Matt and to Daredevil and, what he did under Midland Circle, trying to say, you got out of there alive really in effect, and you can work through this, for sure. I really think that, that scene with Cockroach and Misty, where she suddenly realizes that Scarf has, messed up because obviously he was corrupt and he's had 30 other cases have been released, before parole, before their time.
Yeah.
Because of his illegal work as a cop. And I love that kind of introspection of her where, we see her with a bottle of whiskey, listening to some reggae, and she's opening up the Medal of Honor that she's gotten, and closing it again. And it's really bothering her. And I love that moment where her boss, when she goes back into the precinct, says, you're no fool, but a fool would effectively, give up 3/4 salary tax free for the rest of their lives by coming back. But she wants to be in the field. She wants to be doing the investigations and having, come face to face with Cockroach and just the sliminess of him in that particular moment. She wants to kind of correct those wrongs, I suppose.
Yeah.
To try and get these people that Scarf put away, put back into prison again.
A Cockroach is so slimy that she drops her shopping on the ground and never goes back for it. He's that shocking and that slimy.
That was a little crazy. I was thinking man down, don't leave your lettuce and your Lucky Charms cereal.
Then again, on 3/4 pay tax free, she can probably drop a couple of bags of shopping occasionally, can't she? But I like
your paychecks.
Yeah, she didn't even go back to pick them up. I was just going, Misty, you've forgotten something.
But it does drive her to go back to the police station. So we do get her to meeting up with her new head of the police force. This is the guy from the Defenders, isn't it? It's the guy that worked with her in the Defenders when she was the head of the strike team.
Correct.
Yeah. So he's now moved over to Luke Cage. We have Bailey back, who was her partner in the force after Scarf left. He was the one that was doing a lot of investigations with her in Luke Cage season 1. He seems to have got a better job now and a new partner. So he's now on the force and doing his job daily. So what's the reaction to Misty coming back to the police force? It seems to be a bit of a pushback from everybody that's there.
It's basically they think she's not ready.
Mm-hmm.
I'm agreeing with you, John. I think what we're going to end up getting is a lot of pushback because also the police and Luke don't have the best relationship. So it's going to be known that she is or has worked with these vigilantes in the past quite closely. And we see from the introduction of Luke to the new captain that there's going to be tension.
Uh-huh.
So I think she will be known as the go-between between the police and the vigilantes, and that's going to hurt her kind of reputation with the police. Because remember back in Luke Cage season 1 where we did get the fantastic line about how they are vigilantes. They're not the cops. They shouldn't be allowed to do this.
Absolutely.
I do wonder about the whiskey and that Medal of Honor scene with Misty. I'm wondering if we will get some form of fall before the kind of rise from the phoenix, if you will, of Misty Knight with her kind of new arm and the ass kicking, taking names Daughter of the Dragon. I'm wondering if we will get some form of potentially depression as an additional storyline.
Maybe.
Because I'm just wondering, because there was, as John said, there was that forlorn look where she's looking at the Medal of Valor, or distinction.
Yeah, I mean, it may be. I didn't really think that. I just thought that all of a sudden she was struggling with not being back on the force because she'd seen Cockroach.
Yeah.
And maybe she'd been getting cabin fever anyway from not being on the force, and I mean, it sounds good, 3/4 pay tax-free for the rest of your life, but if it means that you don't have that structure of going to work, I suppose, then it can be a struggle. So I just think that it was more just, she was struggling coming to terms with her medal and then knowing that people that she helped put away with Scarf, because even though Cockroach didn't really say it, I think his taunt to her was that you were his partner, you both put us away, but because he was the rotten egg, then both their investigations failed.
Exactly.
And so that's why she wants to go back. But maybe there will be, Chris, because it's what has that trauma done to her, from the Defenders, and is she, able to cope to go back to work as well. So maybe there will be some, but whether they'll explore it a lot or go into too much detail, I don't know. And presumably, your other prediction of her getting a metal arm from a certain Mr. D. Rand is probably likely to happen as well.
That's possibly likely. Yes, possibly likely. Yes. Yeah, I think they've skipped over the depression part of it. I think that's just a very quick bit of shorthand with her in her apartment on her own, bottle of whiskey, staring at the medal, closing the box. We had the other scene with Claire where they're bouncing a ball back and forth and Misty can't catch it. I think it's just kind of setting the idea that this is someone that was the best detective. She got her own squad in the center of the city, in the Defenders. So this is one of the best detectives the NYPD has seen. Yet she's not able to do the job she wants to. I think she's much more of a person that doesn't wallow in her depression. She wants to do something about it. She's got two offers on the table here. She's got either she goes back to the police force and does the job as best she can, or the offer that's on the table from Luke Cage is come work with him and be the person in the office that sends him on his cases effectively. So that's quite a nice little setup for Misty in this season. You jumped over a little Easter egg, Chris, I think. I think we saw a little Easter egg when we had Luke Cage meeting up with Captain Ridenour. Did you notice the little Sokovia Accords comment that was in there at all, Chris, from your comic book knowledge?
No, I did not see this. Please fill me in, because you know me, Eagle Eye here.
There's a line from Captain Ridenour to Luke Cage where he says, "You're an unlicensed weapon and you need to come work with us." That is effectively what the Sokovia Accords are supposed to guarantee. Now, Luke Cage continued working as part of the Secret Avengers during Civil War, an unlicensed hero as part of the Secret Avengers. So this would actually tie in with how he worked through the original Civil War comic book series, being the one that just stayed doing his work, but in hiding effectively. So it's a nice touch. If they meant it, I'm not sure, but I think it's a nice little comment on the fact that there are still laws in there. Ridenour is effectively saying, if you're actually going out there and being a vigilante using your superpowers to capture people, you have to come and work with us and be a licensed weapon.
Nice spot.
I like that. Nice spot.
There you go.
Let's see how that works out.
That makes sense.
Because that would put a whole different timeline on where we thought it was.
But the Sokovia Accords are still in effect, remember?
Exactly, yeah.
Nobody's taking them down.
No, you're correct. Anyway, moving on. Lads, why don't we go into bullet point 4?
Just a quick mention, really, about one of the major new characters in the show. He was quite central in the background of season 1. James Lucas, the father of Luke Cage, and the father of Willis Stryker, who was Diamondback, the other villain, the third villain of season 1 of Luke Cage. Really good to see James Lucas on screen and getting a lot more screen time in this episode, played by Reggie Cathay from House of Cards, had a role on The Wire as well. Really like the presence this character has. He has some great moments where he's speaking from the pulpit about Luke Cage, and that underpins what's going on in the scenes around. I really like the use of sermons, the way they're being used in this episode with this character of James Lucas, who is totally opposed to what Luke is doing with his life, even though he's definitely not one to talk. Yeah,
it's quite a shame that unfortunately Reggie passed away earlier this year.
That's right.
After they had finished filming, so this is partly his final piece of work. Mm-hmm. So knowing that as well, I'm it's quite sad, but also I'm happy to see him again and see the character. I loved him in Fantastic Four, not the world's best movie, but I loved him in that film as the father.
That's right, yeah.
Seeing him again in this, loved him in the House of Cards, loved him in The Wire. So season 1, he was fantastic. I'm interested to see where they take this storyline. Like, is he just a passing brief stint into the first episode that we see? But based on that sermon that he was preparing in the mirror to give to his congregation, I get the feeling that it's going to be something more.
Yeah.
I really do.
Unresolved daddy issues, hugely important in TV shows. They definitely come up. He is the one that calls out Luke Cage, thinks he's soul brother number one, so he's the one that gets the title of the episode. So quite an important line. If you're going to give the title of an episode to a character, I'd say he's going to be pretty important in the series.
And is he going to be used as leverage against Luke, or is he going to be used to control or try and get rid of Luke by, Luke's enemies that are in Harlem as well? Because, whether they know he is his dad, I'm not too sure. But, if they find out, then obviously, there is that element that can cause that jeopardy, for Luke Cage with his father. But, of course, it doesn't seem as though they have a particularly, close relationship. So maybe not so much.
Absolutely. Like, I love that line between the two of them where Luke is effectively saying that you're just trying to bump up your pews by using my name, saying you're connected to me. That's why you get so many people into your church. And he's going, I was rocking a full congregation since before you were born. It's this real cockiness that comes out on behalf of James Lucas. I really like the way it's being played against each other. It's quite interesting in the show. One of the other things about Luke being the hero of Harlem is, this is something that really isn't explored very often in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. This idea, or in any superhero genre, this idea they always seem to go through is wear a mask to protect the ones you love. Luke Cage is out in the street sticking his face into a camera that's going up on YouTube every 10 minutes saying, come at me, you know where I am. We see Mariah Dillard knows who Claire Temple is when they walk into Harlem's Paradise at the end of the episode. She's had eyes on Claire from the minute she walks in because she knows they're connected. So it's quite interesting. I think this is what will play out throughout this season. We're going to see a lot of the downside of the superhero standing up and going, it's me, I'm Luke Cage. It's me, Iron Man, which we don't really see too much in the other types of superhero genres.
No, absolutely. And I mean, this relationship as well, just to show how toxic it is when they meet in the street, effectively, his father here, James Lucas, is asking, can we have this fresh start? There is some kind of try to sort of move a bit closer. Obviously, he cheated on his mother. There was Luke's brother, Willis Stryker, who was Diamondback, that he didn't know about, and gradually learned that he had this kind of long lost brother who was also, crazy. Yeah. And then,
it was the half brother that wasn't treated as well as
exactly. Yeah. And then I just, Luke absolutely gives the harsh put down of only when you bring mum back from the dead, i.e. it's never going to happen. Yep. So it will be really interesting to see where this goes. If anywhere, will they be reconciled? Will things get worse? It is a really interesting dynamic to have on, the show because, Matt Murdock, his dad is dead. Jessica's parents are dead as well. Danny's parents are dead, so this opportunity to explore this, this father-son relationship, I think is going to be quite interesting. I think. Certainly, with the caliber of Reggie Carthy, on the show, he really does bring so much oomph to that role of James Lucas.
And I love it. I think there is a resemblance between the two personalities at the very least. I think it's kind of cool to see the two of them going at it in the street. Hopefully we'll see more of them in the future. Chris, do you want to take us on to our final bullet point?
Yes. The introduction of what I'm assuming is our big bad for season 2. As long as they don't pull a season 1 on us. We are introduced to Bushmaster, the other Jamaican brother who has come to take Brooklyn and then Harlem, as we are introduced to him.
Yes. You have already made a mistake after not learning anything from season 1, Chris. Our big bad has been here since the beginning. Mariah is in control of Harlem. She is our big bad for the season. This is just another challenger.
It is true. But this challenger is slightly better equipped
Yeah.
than old Cottonmouth.
Yeah, and he certainly does a Geordie LaForge number on old Nigel.
Oh yes, Jordan. For our fellow defenders who aren't quite sure what that means, please elaborate.
So Geordie LaForge was in Star Trek, obviously the Next Generation, fantastic with old Picard, with old Professor X, and he was the engineer of Enterprise with the visor because he was blind. And as soon as Bushmaster starts to dig the knife into Nigel's poor eye, and then cut it across, I was just like, oh my god, this is like the Geordie LaForge like horror show, because I thought that's exactly that's what that came to mind. But like some great takedowns and a good old bear of the chest there from Bushmaster as well. So he can stop bullets. Just not quite as well as Luke Cage, because they do kind of embed. They don't seem to bounce off in any way.
Yeah, it does seem that they've hit him. You go to some very light places when you see a lot of darkness on the TV show. That reminds me of Geordie LaForge.
Well, it's better than My Little Pony.
Yes.
Yes! It really is. Anyway, so moving on. Bushmaster, or AKA also known as John MacGyver. So he is played by Mustafa Shakir, a fantastic actor. And what I'm really interested in seeing is, I at this point I don't want to go in, drop the comic knowledge on who the character is, because there's two of them. There's always two, this is the standard Marvel Comics way. You know what? We killed one off. We're going to create a second one using the exact same name.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I know who it is and what his background is. So maybe in 2 or 3 episodes, if we're given a bit more, I can do a comparison to what we're told versus the origins of the comic book.
Yeah.
But he's powered. He can stop bullets. He's as strong as Luke Cage, from what we can see. He's more agile, though.
Right.
And that's the interesting thing. We see from his fighting style in this scene, like, he's flipping, he's doing capoeira almost, kind of spinning, kind of doing I would say the Brazilian martial arts capoeira, but looks obviously a Jamaican version, maybe.
Maybe, yeah.
It's going to be interesting.
Because we know Luke comes from the boxing standpoint. That's where he learned his fighting style, was the boxing when he was in prison. So
yes, yeah. Hit hard, hit fast. Whereas what we can see with Bushmaster John is that he's quick, he's agile, he's dancing around the place, he sweeps the leg. Yes, for our Karate Kid references, there you go. That's one anyway. I was just really intrigued, because straight away, I agree with you, Derek. Like, Mariah probably is the big bad, and because straight away they reveal, at the end of episode 1, they reveal a superpowered individual. And it's just like, straight away, they rip open the shirt and you see the bullets embedded in his skin. And I was like, wow, okay, that's bold.
Yeah.
You're basically, in season 1, it took us, 8 episodes to get introduced to the secondary big bad.
Diamondback, yeah, that was episode 9, yeah.
So they've kind of gone the opposite and went, you know what, we made you wait in season 1. Now we're not going to.
Well, that's it. What I love about it is in this episode, they took away his other, I suppose, weak spot from season 1, which was the Judas Bullet. They've taken that away at the start of this episode, or during this episode, and now they've given us, but don't worry, we've got a guy that's got superpowers in this city, and he's also bulletproof, and he's also fast, and he's also mean. There is some major fights to happen from Luke Cage.
Yeah, but the thing is as well, his absolute focus is on Mariah Stokes as well. It is about Mariah Stokes, and I think as well it links to that flashback in Mariah's office with Shades as they're discussing with the 3 kingpins of their respective crime families, because that is as you were speaking to poor old Nigel, who got his eyes cut out, because there's something there. You see the loathing and the hatred for Mariah Stokes, and it has to be Stokes. It's not Dillard. That's right. Again, I wonder, just with that whole, the whole investment venture that Mariah wants to do. You know, she says a really interesting thing where it's like, it will wash away the risk and all the bad things that Stokes have done.
Yes.
And so, you know, are we going to see maybe a bit more of the Stokes family history? You know, again, her mum and just that influence that her mum has on her is brought up again there, because we see her drinking whiskey in her house. Same whiskey as Misty.
That's right.
Johnny Walker Black Label. You know, were
Whiskey Watch
indeed, where, you know, Shades is kind of going, why are you celebrating your mother's birthday? Don't you hate her? And, you know, she just goes, it's the hate that makes it special.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's a real thing there that we caught a glimpse of in season 1. And, you know, does this relate in some way to Bushmaster? And why, you know, after he has taken Brooklyn, he will then set his sights on Harlem and Mariah Stokes. It seems to me at the moment that potentially Luke Cage is going to be, it's almost like collateral damage in some ways, because he will try and stop any criminal on the streets, whether it's Mariah Dillard or Bushmaster. And it may be in that context that these two meet. But certainly at this moment, Bushmaster is made aware of Luke Cage from Nigel before his tragic end, but he's there for Dillard.
Yeah, he
Mariah.
doesn't seem to have any beef at all with Luke. This doesn't seem like Luke's villain. This seems like Mariah's villain.
Yeah, I know I said that I'm not going to get too much, or wasn't going to touch on Bushmaster's history, but one part that just kind of reminded me, based on what John was saying, is in the comic books, John McIver, Bushmaster, is deeply ingrained with the history of Shades.
Right.
The guys went to jail together, they grew up together, they went up the ranks together.
Right.
They went to jail together. So there's a good bit of history there, depending on kind of which run you're reading. And I'd be really interested to see, based on what you're talking about in the Stokes, he's going after the Stokes, the fact that Shades is with Mariah, that they are a partnership.
Mm-hmm.
Then that could set up a very interesting dynamic, in terms of that fight. So I don't know. If they go down that route, I'd be really interested to.
Yeah.
If they don't, it's fine as well, but I'd be interested to see.
Absolutely, yeah. Lots of interesting stuff set up in this episode. Before we get into notes, is there anything else about Bushmaster?
Can't wait to see more of him, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
Really enjoyed his brief presence, on this first episode.
Absolutely. So now that we're finished our bullet points, let's go on to our notes. My first note is about Bushmaster. I love the moment just after he's killed Nigel Garrison. He gets Lucy Liu's line from Kill Bill Volume 1 where he says, if you have anything else to say, now's the time. And he just adds a little bit after it, which is effectively, if you don't say anything, you follow me now. That's exactly the scene as Lucy Liu stood on the table. She cuts off the head of one person that disrespects her and says, if you have anything else to say, now's the time, or else everybody falls in line with me. Nice to have it in there. I wonder, did Cheo Coker write it specifically knowing that Lucy Liu was going to direct the episode, saying, nice little reference to you there?
I'd be 100% sure about that one.
Yeah.
Derek, you're usually in our Luke Cage coverage, our music maestro, our aficionado in all things musical when it comes to this very musically inspired TV show. I know you have some really good notes about this one, so take it away.
Yeah, there's some great ones in here. Joy is the singer that's on stage in the club, with D Nice on the decks behind her. She's got such a beautiful voice and does some great songs in here. Usually when these shows come out, we don't get a lot of the detail behind the people, and I was looking up lyrics that she was singing on the internet, trying to find out who the performer was. The first one is a cover of a Chris Brown song called Say Goodbye, so that completely confused me. I had no idea that she was doing the cover. The cover hasn't been released. The second one is called What If I Kissed You Right Now. It took me ages to find out this performer, but I think she's beautiful in this scene, and there's some great underplaying of this music that the What If I Kissed You Right Now is being used as Luke and Claire Temple are having their kiss in the street. It's beautiful behind the two of them. There's also a brilliant music touch. You can tell Cheo Coker is underpinning all of the emotions in the show and all of the little moments in the show. John mentioned it earlier on, the song that Misty Knight is listening to in her apartment while she's drinking whiskey. And then it transfers over to Luke and Claire having their sex scene. That song is called Night Nurse by Gregory Isaacs. You might remember it. It's a very famous song, but I love that it's being used as Claire Temple is taking care of Luke. She is the night nurse. It's a nice little touch in there. Lots and lots of other great music in this episode. I could do an entire episode just about the music in the show. There's loads of great songs that are being chosen with Mariah Dillard. Love of Nina Simone's is used again in this episode. Some great music in there. Lots more to come throughout the season. Really interesting. The performer on stage, Joy, got 3 songs in this episode. I think that's the most, more than any other band from season 1 got. So I think we're going to see that in play, throughout the season. I'm hoping they don't burn down Harlem's Paradise again in episode 6.
Yeah. I've got we talked about Luke Cage having a lot of books in the first season.
Yes, we did. Yeah, the book watch.
So he was in season 1. He was reading Little Green, that was by Walter Mosley, and it's about this American PI called Easy Rawlins. And we see here that he's still reading through these books as he's now onto Charcoal Joe. Out in 2016.
Yeah, that only came out a couple of years ago. It's really interesting. I love this. It's like as if, I think we might have talked about it because of Luke's leanings for doing investigation, that it's kind of like, this is the template that he wants to follow. If he could just be as good a detective or as good a PI as this guy, he could set up his own agency almost. So he has these books as well as loads of other books that he's reading all the time, but he has these books always on the go, like he's interested in finding out how a PI does his job.
Absolutely.
Wouldn't you just love to have known a PI in his background? Someone who you could reach out to who's a well-known PI in Hell's Kitchen. Yeah, if only he knew one. Who could that be? Who knows? Anyway, continue. Sorry.
And then, of course, there was the other book, Between the World and Me, by Coates Taneshi, who is writing Black Panther comic books. And this is all about feelings, symbols, and the world of being a Black American. And it is a letter from the author to his son. So, a really interesting read there for Luke Cage as well. Really, really powerful. We have Whiskey Watch as well, as we mentioned, with the Johnny Walker, Black Label, as well. So yeah, some nice little cultural touch points here, in the books,
as always,
and in the songs.
Yeah.
Definitely.
As always, I think they put together a reading list after season 1 because of so many wonderful Black American authors were brought up in season 1 with the books that Luke Cage is reading. It looks like they're going to be doing something similar in season 2.
Speaking of cultural kind of notes, I did like the framing of Mariah in her office with the new twin portrait of crowns, king and queen. So we had this very famous scene in season 1 where we had Cottonmouth framed behind with a picture of a famous rapper with a crown on his head.
Biggie Smalls.
Yes, Biggie Smalls. So the notorious B.I.G. sitting there, and he was framed in front of it, so the crown was sitting on his head. That painting is now replaced with a abstracty type painting with 2 figures wearing 2 crowns, and she was standing in front of it in the same position as Cottonmouth was, but with 2 crowned figures. So very interesting in terms of what we now know about her and Shades.
Absolutely.
It was just a I just thought it was a nice nod to season 1, and that's shot.
King and Queen of New York. Yeah. I've got one final one. Just a nice little touch in the background of the shot in Pop's barbershop where we see the Luke Cage logo that DW has created for him on a t-shirt. I think that's a reference to the Public Enemy symbol. It's white words with red lines on above and below the white words, which is pretty much the Public Enemy symbol from when they started out years ago. I wouldn't put it past Cheo Coker to be that detailed in the kind of logos he would choose. And it sounds like something that DW would do for Luke Cage as well. Take somebody else's stuff and just, and incorporate it into Luke Cage's, concept for his brand as well. So, nice touches so far. That's all we found in notes wise for this episode. I am sure there's going to be people scouring, when these episodes come out on the 22nd of June, there's going to be people scouring the episodes, picking up loads and loads of Easter eggs that we haven't found. If you find any that we have missed, just send them in to us at feedback@defenderstvpodcast.com, along with any other feedback. As we said, we're recording this ahead of time, so we don't have any feedback for this episode. But what we do have, as always, is our defends for Luke Cage Season 2. And Chris, since it's your birthday, happy birthday, Chris.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
You get the task of starting us off. Do you defend Luke Cage Season 2, Episode 1, Soul Brother Number 1?
Hell yeah. Sweet Christmas and every other cliche Luke Cage catchphrase. I'm not going to give this massive praising in terms of, oh my god, this is the perfect setup to the perfect season. Taking it as an individual Marvel Netflix show opening episode, this is very strong. This is from all the other season 2s that we've seen, and say just taking Defenders as a whole. From an opening episode, this sets up the feeling, it sets up the tone, it sets up the main characters, it gives you an update, progress on where they are, it gives you it introduces what potentially could be one of the big bads straight away, shows they put all their cards on the table. Very much so. And it's really interesting to see that. I'm straight away hooked. I wanted to binge onto episode 2. I literally was like, oh my god, oh my god. And I was just like, okay, that's how you do it. Because we talked about this previously in the past of how Netflix, and especially the Marvel Netflix shows, are great at that final scene. And this is the exact same.
And weirdly, didn't we say that Luke Cage Season 1 was the one that we said wasn't good at the cliffhangers? Exactly. This episode really was.
Exactly. They've learned, mistakes is the wrong word. They learned from potentially some of the shortcomings of season 1. From what I can see in episode 1 of season 2. They've strengthened certain characters, they've developed certain characters, they've expanded on relationships, and they've kind of gone, hey, we know we made you wait till episode 9 to give you another powered guy. Guess what? Here he is. So, taking this in isolation, I fully defend this episode of Luke Cage Season 2, Episode 1, and I'm dying to see the remaining episodes.
Excellent. And fellow defenders, just to let you know, since it was Chris's birthday, I did tell him he could watch Episode 2 of Season 2 of Luke Cage.
Chris,
but he said no.
Blessed.
He said no. I gave him the opportunity to watch ahead, and he said no.
I care about coming in clean and fresh to this recording, as well as I am untouched by any marketing.
I am very impressed.
Trailers.
You are very fresh
bring
today,
it on.
Chris.
I'm very impressed. Well, let's find out what John thought. John, do you defend Luke Cage Season 2, Episode 1, Soul Brother Number 1?
I do defend Episode 1 of this second season of Luke Cage. I give this 4 abandoned and lonely shopping bags out of 5. I really...
Nice, that I wasn't expecting that.
I really think it was just a really assured opening. And I think, it brings in things from Defenders, it brings in things from season 1 of Luke Cage in an appropriate way, really good way, adding to what they want to tell in this story, at least for this first episode, from what I can see. And again, I think it's a real good melting pot of, you have all these crime families coming together. You've got Luke's dad, you've got Luke and Claire that are, despite the old sexy Marvel butt, making an appearance here for the first time, there's a little bit of tension between these two. So you have that. You've got Misty dealing with the fact she's been laid off the force for a while, really wanted to come back after she's had effectively her nose rubbed in it by Cockroach. But you've got Bushmaster coming in as well. And I think this is really, it chucked in all the ingredients into this fabulous sort of mixture here that I think really excites me for the rest of this season. And I have to say, he wasn't on the screen for very long, but I really did like Bushmaster a lot here. And anyone that can give style, violence, and a bit of horror, at least with what he did to poor Nigel, he really landed the somersault for me. You've got parallels with Cottonmouth. You've got parallels with Diamondback. And I just thought he was cool, had presence, and feels really intimidating, for the future. And of course, then you've got the return of Mariah Dillard. And I love this lady. I love her swagger, and I can't wait to see what she does. So I think there's a really strong start. I love the musical references. I like some of the literature references in here. It really just gives a strong flavor and vibe for Luke Cage season 2, which I really, really just, lapped up, to be honest, in this first season. And again, the pacing is really, it's not fast, but it's deliberate and assured, I think. It really knows what it wants to do. So, Derek, do you defend this episode of Luke Cage season 2?
You took the words out of my mouth just before it got over to me. Absolutely how we described season 1 of Luke Cage was that it's deliberately paced. This feels deliberately paced with confidence, is what I'd say about this episode of season 2. It feels like I know where I'm going. I'll get there when I'll get there. And you just need to pay attention to all of these characters and go along for the ride. And I love that ride. I absolutely defend this episode. I felt the vibe instantly from that opening scene when Luke is busting in heads and all the guys are just standing there with their guns going, well, we got to try. We know you're bulletproof. Everybody knows that, but we got to try and use our guns on you. It's got a nice confidence about it, a nice swagger about it. The music is great. The performances are great. I can't wait for episode 2 of this show. Really looking forward to it. It's been so much fun talking about the episode with you guys. So much fun to talk about it with you, fellow Defenders. Thanks so much for joining us for this episode. Make sure you subscribe to our podcast over on DefendersTVPodcast.com. You can get us on iTunes, on Play, on any good or evil podcast catcher out there. Also, make sure you send in your feedback. Email us at feedback@DefendersTVPodcast.com. Go to our website at DefendersTVPodcast.com. Click on the send voicemail button and you can send your thoughts to us in a voicemail, which will play on the episodes in future. But we'll be back very soon with our coverage of episode 2. We'll be back over this weekend and then we'll be moving to our schedule of Tuesdays and Fridays each week from then on.
Yeah. And of course, you can come on over to Facebook, to our group, to the spoiler-filled hidden comment posts that we do, so it doesn't spoil anyone. But please post any of your thoughts, any of your discussions over in our Facebook group on these spoiler-filled discussion threads. We love to hear your thoughts on this. And of course, if you're just joining us for this podcast for the first time, please head on over to facebook.com/groups/Defenders TV podcast and come on over and join the discussions and the community for this season of Luke Cage. I think it is going to be really, really good.
And of course, please remember to share the love by sharing the podcast. If you've enjoyed our podcast, make sure you share it through all of your social channels so that other people that may be interested in listening to our podcast about Luke Cage can hear it.
Yes, and because we like keeping the lights on here, well, or the mics on, I should say, at Defenders TV Podcast. This episode was brought to you in part by Stitcher Premium. Guys, we know you love Marvel. We know you love podcasts. So you know what? Head on over to Stitcher. Check out their premium service where you get, including a fantastic scripted podcast called Wolverine the Long Night. Fantastic stuff. Some fantastic actors. And do you know what? Because we love you, we like passing on the wins, you can get a free month of Stitcher Premium by just using the promo code Defenders. And yes, if you like us, tell your soul brothers, tell your soul sisters, share the love, spread the word. But do you know what also? Tell them about Stitcher Premium because there's a fantastic podcast there called
Defenders TV Podcast. We're available on Stitcher too.
We are. Yes, exactly.
You don't have to
so
get
you
for
can
premium,
get two fantastic podcasts there.
There you go. Thanks so much for joining us, fellow Defenders. We'll be back with our review of Luke Cage Season 2, Episode 2, Straighten It Out, this weekend, as I mentioned, and then we'll be moving to Tuesdays and Fridays each week from then on.
Yes, and in the immortal words of Luke Cage, sweet Christmas, goodbye, happy summer, happy weekend. See you this weekend.
Yes, as always, thank you so much for listening, fellow Defenders. Remember, no bullet can kill me, no man can stop me, and no one can stop me from getting to you through the medium of podcasting. So, as always, we'll speak with you again next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.